Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, bonus episode. We're joined by Bob Thompson, former president of Fox Sports Networks and Fox Sports International, founder of the Thompson Sports Group, and providing some insight as it relates to the new Big 12 television agreement with Fox and ESPN. Also, thoughts on the future of the Pac-12 and what their impending agreement may look like. We get into it all next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Thanks again for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day for this special bonus episode. Great to be with you on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm Casey Cowan and thrilled to be joined by Bob Thompson, founder of Thompson Sports and, of course, the former Fox Sports president, Fox Sports International. This is a guy who knows what's going on when we're talking television contracts. And Bob, I can't say thank you enough for your time here today. I've enjoyed following you on Twitter as you've been speculating with the rest of us, though obviously your opinion's a little bit more informed. And you agreed to have this conversation with me last week, and I thought we would still kind of be speculating a little bit, and we might, but we've got a Big 12 agreement now in place with ESPN and Fox. And just to begin our conversation, I'm curious maybe what stood out to you about that agreement.
Well, first of all, Casey, thanks for having me. I think you're absolutely right on the whole speculating part. I had speculated recently that I didn't think they were that close and nothing was imminent because I had listened to the commissioner and he was talking about how they hadn't even got to the term discussions. And then lo and behold, we wake up yesterday morning and there's the deal. So I don't know that I got that much more inside information than anyone else, but I think the deal is great for the conference. I think it provides them with some stability going forward, which there's been a little lack of in the Big 12 for a couple of years with the departures of Texas and Oklahoma. I think that it also provides them with some certainty in terms of revenue dollars going forward, certainty as to revenue dollars they might be able to dangle in front of potential expansion candidates. And it also, I think, gets them with the 6-year deal, it gets them in a good position for their next renewal, and that they'll be, after the Big 10. So you can assume the Big 10 can come in and set a bar. And certainly the Big 12 can try and get as close to that bar as possible. And it also allows them to go before the SEC a few years and a number of years before the ACC. The only kind of one hanging out is the Pac-12, and I would assume that deal's going to be done here relatively soon.
Well, I was curious about anything that might have surprised you, and maybe it was more so how actually imminent a deal was, or the timing of this. Wasn't an announcement. I guess it was a leak or reporting or whatever way you want to describe it, but a Sunday drop. Were you surprised by that? And what do you think that's all about? Does that relate to Pac-12 meetings or maybe impending announcements from them? How did you process that?
I at first, it really was a surprise. You just don't bury news like that on a Sunday. I think that it could have been, maybe they wanted to get it in Sports Business Journal, who the story was leaked to. Their edition comes out on Monday. So by getting it with them on Sunday, it was for sure going to be in there. In this week's issue. It could be that there's a feeling that someone else is going to make an announcement and they wanted to jump them. And I don't know that anything's imminent anywhere else, like Pac-12 or so forth, or that there's any potential conference expansion announcements coming. But I think certainly the conference decided it was the right move to make. And, I think other than, making a lot of people's Sundays a little more exciting, it was hard to knock them on it.
Yeah, certainly in Big 12 country, it made our Sunday a little bit more exciting. No doubt about that. I was certainly interested in visiting with you for so many reasons, but one of those primarily because of what right now is the conversation surrounding over-the-air access, cable network access, streaming platforms. And it kind of seemed like these two, the Big 12 and now the Pac-12, were the ones that maybe most recently, at least, were discussing some of these possible streaming options. I wonder if you tell me if I'm wrong or right seeing it this way. I feel like as tradition-based as college football is, and most of those leaders, I assume, are, is there some great hesitancy to really, turn it over, tier one rights or something like that to a streaming platform? How do you see this breakdown between, hey, you've got digital opportunity and maybe huge dollars? I mean, huge dollars possibly, especially in the case of the Pac-12 potentially, versus just simple access for your consumer.
Right. That's been a age-old consideration. And back when I was involved, first getting some of the stuff onto cable, it was the same way. Do we leave broadcast for cable? And now it's, do we leave broadcast and cable for streaming? I think it'd be very smart for all the conferences, and pretty much every deal that's happened has a streaming element, for them to dip their toe into it and get used to it. You have to go where your fans are, and increasingly fans are on other platforms besides basic cable and over the air broadcast. You've got a lot of people cutting the cord. You've got a lot of people who had never even had the cord in the first place, and they're consuming their media in a different way. But what you have to be careful of is you don't want to get locked into this idea of trading dollars for distribution. The dollars that the streaming services can dangle in front of you are very, very enticing, but you have to think about what you're potentially giving up in terms of widespread exposure. And I think if you look at the deals that have been done recently, with the Big Ten, which has 3 over-the-air broadcast networks, truly an NFL model, and then the 2 cable networks as well, with BTN and Fox Sports 1. And then you also, in the Big 12 deal, you've got Fox and ESPN and ABC and FS1. And their streaming element, though, on top of that is ESPN Plus. So they've got the wide distribution on your typical linear broadcast and cable networks, but they've also added the portion of ESPN Plus, where those third tier rights have been for a number of years. And so that there's still going to be some access across the board. The one that's hanging out there and who might be looking at actually trading dollars for distribution is the Pac-12. There's been a lot of talk about them potentially going with Amazon and or Apple, along with a typical linear broadcast / cable provider. And so that'll be the interesting one to see. And it's I think it makes sense. We're getting towards an inflection point, I think, in the television business where,
yes, sir.
The numbers are continuing to dwindle for the linear broadcasting cable in terms of people in the bundle, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I think you've got to hedge your bets. I don't know that you go all in yet. But you probably don't want to be doing a 15-year deal right now that's going to lock you into something that you can't get out of. So I think you'll see the deals become a little shorter than they have been in the past. I mean, the Big 12's coming off a 13-year deal. The Pac-12's off a 12-year deal. At the time, the broadcasters thought they were great, and the conferences thought they're great too, because they could announce a big number because it was so many years. Yeah. But now with the potential changes in technology, I think the deals are going to be a bit shorter. Just so that you can take advantage of the shifting dynamics in the television business.
Yeah, and I think learning some things from the ACC's length of agreement, and you think now about Central Florida and what they could be making versus Miami or Florida State in a few years, and it's about to get really interesting when some of those things come to fruition. And yeah, I'm one of those smart guys that cut the cord and was going to do things the smart way. And now I've got 35 subscriptions. I'm just wishing somebody would give me a cable package. So there's no telling what the evolution will look like, but the inflection point is out there somewhere, the tipping point.
Yeah, no one knows. I mean, it's, probably when it gets around 50 million homes left in the bundle, that's going to be, I could see ESPN creating a simulcast of the ESPN channel that you get on your satellite or wherever, on their app, and you're going to pay for it. And that's what people, I think, don't realize when they dump the bundle. Next thing you know, you've got a half a dozen or more streaming services, and what they were at what seemed like a really good price. Well, some of those prices are going up now, and that has to happen because they're all losing a lot of money. So it was inevitable that would happen. I think it'll be inevitable that there'll be some sort of consolidation amongst the streaming services, some sort of streaming bundles. I mean, right now you can get the Disney Plus, the Hulu, and the ESPN Plus in a bundle. I think you're going to see more of that, and maybe bundles of 7, 8 different streaming services that will be offered by somebody if you can get all of the individual entities to agree on how the money should be divvied up.
I can tell you firsthand, I'm obviously a sports fan, and Hulu Live is where I went when I went away from traditional cable, and it was because of the sports opportunity, not missing anything there. And I've seen over the years how they have integrated the ESPN Plus stuff into their actual guide. Again, I'm real smart. I'm just back to another cable guide and don't even know it. But I wonder if that was one of the advantages there for, say, the Big 12 or somebody else involved with ESPN to now have that kind of further down the road of being integrated into some of these things, say, as opposed to a Thursday night Amazon Prime game where you feel kind of isolated getting into that app and you're not really channel surfing, I guess.
That's a very astute observation. I think one of the things that I've always had a little issue with the apps is moving from the ecosystem that I use, which is DirecTV, into the apps. It's kind of, I call it clunky because it's just not easy. I can hit 3 buttons and I'm, from one channel to another, or I just hit my favorites one time and I'm to another channel. The difficulty with, leaving my bundle and then getting on the app and then finding the game on the app, even though usually it's right there, right in front of you, it just takes a little bit of time. And as you know, sports viewers are just absolutely horrific at staying on one channel very long. They're clicking around the whole time. And so to go from the from one platform to another is kind of difficult. I think for Thursday night, it's worked very well for Amazon. And that's primarily because it's the only game on at that time. Mm-hmm. If you say, okay, Amazon's on a Saturday and there's, say it's the 3:30 Eastern window, there's probably 6 other games on. On the ESPN channels, the Fox channels, the conference owned channels, CBS. It is just a ton of games. And so are people going to, leave that, plethora of games and go to the Amazon to watch one college game? I think if they're a fan of that team, I could see that. They go there and they just sit there and watch it. Sure. But if you're somebody just kind of grazing around, you're not going to necessarily run into that game by accident. You're going to have to want to go there. And ESPN Plus has been very smart as to how they've integrated that into Hulu, which at some point I assume Disney's going to own all of Hulu. And so you'll see a lot more of an integration with ESPN Plus through the Hulu Live than you will with, at least at this point, with Amazon through anybody.
Well, I'm glad we got on the subject of weeknights or Thursday nights. And I got to say, even on Thursday night, I'm a big football fan, but not really one over the other, NFL or college. I'm like weighing on traditional outlets the combination of Thursday night college games, how interesting they are, versus totally committing to Amazon and not hitting the remote again. So I think there are probably a lot of fans that process it that way. But Thursday night, Friday night, I'm curious, do you think that the Big 12 within this new agreement, are we going to be in for some more non-Saturday or non-traditional game times possibly? Because it really does seem like some others have gotten into that type of rhythm within the Power 5 landscape.
Right. I think you see more and more. I mean, a lot of conferences backed off on Thursday night when Fox had the games. But now with them on Amazon, it seems as though there's a few more scheduled this year than in years past. I think that certainly the networks like the games outside the Saturday window because you're, instead of up against 5 or 6 games, you may be up against 1 or 2 at the most. I think like week 0 games, Labor Day games, Thanksgiving Day games, Black Friday games, things like that are really important, I think, not only to the networks, but to the conference as well, to be able to kind of own the time slot and be the game on at any given time that's going to expose your programs and your conference to the widest number of people possible is always a good idea.
Yes, sir. I'm curious. Do you think that maybe college football fans or college sports fans in general assume there's more friction or competition? I mean, there has to be a ton of competition, but maybe more friction between Fox and ESPN than there actually is. Is there like network beef? Is there more of a cooperative effort? What does that actually look like behind those closed doors when you are working with similar partners?
Well, in many cases, it's kind of overblown.
Imagine that.
Yeah, if the Big 12 and the Pac-12, ESPN and Fox were basically partners on the deal, and they had to figure out a way to schedule the selections and work through all that. Part of it's determined by who paid the most money and who had the first position. But there's a lot of things that are going on. I mean, Fox sometimes has events and they need to have some help from ESPN and vice versa, the other way around. So they've been working together for years. And I mean, a part of our international operations, we jointly owned a network in Asia together. And, people don't realize that there is a lot of work. And, the guys at ESPN International and the folks at ESPN in New York and Bristol, like, Burke Magnus and all the folks there in the collegiate section of ESPN. We worked with them a ton. And this whole idea that, we're out there trying to stab each other in the back, I think is a little bit overblown. Do we compete? Absolutely.
Sure.
But, at the end of the day, and sports is really one of those few businesses that this actually happens, whether it's professional teams or collegiate conferences. Sure, you compete, but at the end of the day, you also are very decent to each other. And it's not this dog eat dog thing. We're all out there to do a job. And that is provide sports to as many people as we can. And, we're going to compete, but also at the end of the day, we're going to cooperate.
Yeah, no doubt. And thankfully, because that's led to access you never would have believed just a few decades ago to your favorite team every Saturday or Thursday or Friday, whenever that might be. I came across you on Twitter at RLT Sports. You can see it there on YouTube if you're watching us there. Some fascinating perspectives. Did I see right? You're originally from the West Coast?
I am originally from Portland. I went to the University of Oregon, left there in like 80 and other than a few trips to the Oregon coast and to see relatives, haven't been back a whole lot. And it's, I decided I didn't like the rain that much. So now I'm retired down here in Arizona and enjoying the nice winter weather that we've just had all of a sudden hit. And it's only 80 instead of 108.
No kidding. I'm curious, personally speaking, now that we've got some Big 12 dust settled to a degree, there's been so much Big 12 Pac-12 comparison. I mean, what's your speculation on the future of the Pac-12 and who may be a member or who may not, or what their agreements could look like? Do you have any feel for that?
Yeah, I think that the question is if they want to keep a team at Southern Cal and so that they have a home. A lot of the recruiting comes out of Southern Cal, so the ability to be able to take teams in there every year is great for the families of the student athletes, and it's great for recruiting to be able to say you're coming back, you'll be able to come back. And so my guess is that if they do decide to expand, they go at San Diego State first. Whether they go beyond San Diego State for UNLV, Fresno State, Boise, somebody like that, that's I think a little up for debate. And they don't really have to do anything, but I think having a school in Southern California would be good. I would assume that their deal is going to be, like I said, right around the Big 12 deal, probably 5-year deal, certainly not less than that, and probably not a whole lot more either. And, it should be announced here pretty soon. It's taken a little while, which, they're out of their exclusive window, which tells me they're talking to other people. And so as opposed to the Big 12 deal, which was with the existing partners, it's always easier to come to an agreement on with the incumbents because there's a contract already in place. And it's just a matter of changing some numbers more or less and changing the term. With a new provider, as there may be the case with the Pac-12, it's a lot more complicated of trying to get them to fit into what say ESPN and or Fox or just one of them has been working off the last several years. Plus the fact that it's being a streamer presents a whole different kind of set of
Sure.
new circumstances that neither of the parties have necessarily been involved in.
Do you have any thought of potentially, because this was a 4-letter word in Big 12 country, we've experienced this unequal revenue sharing. Is that a realistic conversation as it pertains to Washington or Oregon having a longer future maybe than is speculated upon right now in the Pac-12?
I think that it's something that can be constructed if constructed correctly. And I think it has to be very incentive laden. I'm not sure I even necessarily go for just TV appearances as what was part of the problem with the Big 12 in years past. Winning the championship, getting to the CFP playoff, things like that are, you can, there's certainly a dollar value that can be attached to that. And I think it would be important for Oregon and Washington, probably more so than the other schools, in order to get them to remain fully committed. I think that for the Big 12, I think right now that conference is probably, if you take out Texas and Oklahoma, as equal as they've ever been. I mean, from top to bottom, you really have parity. I mean, you had Kansas was leading the conference for a number of weeks, and so it's great top to bottom, and that's great for the networks. I mean, to be able to have every game mean something on any given week is great. The downside is beat each other up so bad that it's going to be tough for somebody to get through. And, other than maybe a conference champion who might have an automatic bid in the CFP. So that's the parity's great. And I'm not a huge fan of unequal revenue sharing at the collegiate level. I think that it can be important in order to, create some stability in places that otherwise, Oregon, Washington lead the Pac-12s. They got a tough road to hoe, because I would assume the Big 12 is going to go try and pluck the corner schools, and then you're left with Stanford, Cal, Washington State, Oregon State, and the Big 12 or the Big 10 might go after Stanford and Cal as well, and then you've got a 6-team Western Division made to order. So I think whatever the Pac-12 can do to entice Oregon and Oregon State, or Oregon and Washington, to stay is very important for their ongoing livelihood.
I have a thought of unequal revenue sharing bringing stability to a conference in the same way that you bring stability to a marriage by making it an open relationship, possibly. I don't know, but it may be entertaining, so I'm willing to watch it play out. Before I let you go, Bob, one thing that caught us or caught our attention, certainly in Big 12 country, the basketball aspect of this agreement with Fox was kind of exciting to me. I'm wondering if the basketball being so good in the Big 12, was this actually of some help as it relates to maybe Fox trying to impress more upon their basketball, platform, or am I just dreaming that up? What did you make of the basketball component?
That was one of the surprises to me, because Fox had never had any Big 12 basketball. I think that, they added a little basketball with the Big 10 agreement for the network and for FS1, and, adding the Big 12 basketball complement, I think is great. They currently have the Big East, and it's possible that it was some sort of hedge against potentially losing the Big East down the road, to be able to have, two conferences. The flip side, the other thing I could say as well, maybe they're not going to play in the Pac-12 rights game, and so they're going to lose some basketball that they had there for a number of years. And so to just swap out the Big 12 for the Pac-12 and basically stay set at the same number of games, men's college basketball games, that would accomplish that. So that's just another reason why I'm not sure that Fox is going to go hard after the Pac-12. I really look at it more as ESPN and probably one of the streaming services.
That's really interesting, and maybe a tell that a lot of sports fans might not be picking up on as it relates to where they are investing their energy and their money. Bob Thompson, former president of Fox Sports Networks and Fox Sports International, the founder of the Thompson Sports Group. I can't say thank you enough for the time. I've enjoyed your perspectives on Twitter and appreciate the conversation today.
My pleasure, Casey. Enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. And of course, for other bonus episodes you don't want to miss, be sure to be subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts so you'll know when they are hitting the scene. And subscribe if you haven't so far. Thanks for joining us once again on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And we're back at it with new episodes each weekday, again on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts on Locked On Texas Tech.